Today's presenter is Joe Gleinser. Joe is the co-founder and chief product officer of Trustgrid. Today, he's going to be talking about connecting FinTech to core banking data. So Joe, I'll let you take it from here.
Thanks, Lance. Thanks everybody for joining today. So that's obviously the topic of the day is the integration and connectivity of core banking data into FinTech applications. I am the chief product officer and co-founder here at Trustgrid. This problem is near and dear to our heart. It is an area we've developed quite a bit of experience in over the last 3.5 years, really focusing on this issue at a very minute level. Along the way, we've installed about 1,000 Trustgrid nodes across more than 500 FIs and helped many FinTech providers connect to and integrate that core banking data. So we're going to share some of the information we've learned today on that and dive to deeper technical concepts. So let's jump right in here. So I think all of us, to a certain extent, are familiar with the why behind connecting to core banking systems. Early days, of course, the first quick-in integration to your local bank account to download transaction information, a read-only methodology leveraging services like Yodlee. Now much more advanced functionality. Fraud detection is one that Trustgrid sees quite a bit. The ability to the AML type functionality. Obviously, full digital and mobile banking is ubiquitous in the industry today. Q2 Digital Insights, some examples of those, both read and write functionality required for that, and the ability, of course, to be up all the time. Very high availability concerns there as your online branch has become your most important branch. Account opening, another area that Trustgrid works in, the ability to write back to the core banking system for the creation of a new account. Payments, both peer-to-peer and traditional payments, do a lot of core integration. And then rewards, also some loan origination, business intelligence, a variety of other ones here on top of these, but these are your major use cases for core integration. Let's talk about how this has been done in the past, because this is not really a new problem. This problem has been wrestled with for decades at this point in time. But in the pre-internet days, it was really solved simply with on-premise software deployments, right? You delivered an enterprise application to an FI. They provided hardware. Their team did the install. Integration was done, and it was managed more or less by the FI. Over the years, applications became centralized, first in data centers and then in cloud. And that really complicated the integration piece. We want to run our centralized applications, but we have to connect to the on-premise data. And so new methods were invented to overcome those challenges. The four that we see the most in the market today are some sort of software agent on-premise, typically either software or virtual appliance that's connecting to the core in some fashion, frequently for read-only access and frequently just for batch transactions. This is not real-time connectivity. And you've got a lot of folks out there running these in the hundreds and thousands. And of course, with that, you run into problems with version control, with a single point of failure, and the limitations of read-only and batch transactions. Much more modern solution today, core APIs are obviously the ideal method to handle a lot of this connectivity, but there's still very few cores overall that support those. The support at the API level can vary wildly by the core provider. The enthusiasm for supporting the API, the time to connect to it, getting a new account stood up with a provider offering the API connectivity can be very difficult. Networking is the one using VPN and MPLS connections that we'll talk a lot about too. This is really the enterprise grade solution that has dominated for the last 20 years for those providers that need to be able to write back to the core and have real-time availability where downtime is dollars. This has been the preferred solution using technology from legacy vendors like Cisco's DMVPN. And the big payments networks are all run on these sort of systems. So very, very popular, very expensive, and very difficult and complex to manage. And then finally, data aggregators, starting with the Yodelees, but now the Plaids, where they do have an API interface. They've extended their reach to hundreds or thousands of banks, but typically also a read-only interface, but much more modern technology. Definitely their core business is providing that API access, and can be very expensive in its own right on a per transaction basis. So those are kind of the big 5 methods that we've seen in the market to handle this problem. But cloud has introduced another layer of complexity to this. So first we have the centralized applications that required innovation. And now cloud is forcing a number of our customers and our prospective customers to rethink this equation again. And it's not just because cloud is an infrastructure change. That certainly is part of it. Our customers that have tried to take the legacy Cisco solutions into Amazon or Azure have run into a number of challenges that have forced them to look for other solutions. But also because you're going to innovate faster in the cloud. The idea that you're focused your talents and energy and resources on improving that product and not building out data center infrastructure, you're going to be able to build new features. And what we're finding is our customers, as they're adding new features, it's changing the requirements from their integration technologies. So yes, cloud connectivity is piece of this, but the benefit of the cloud alters your needs substantially as well. The path there, though, has been a bit bumpy for our customers as they're realizing this. And this is a few main areas. The first, of course, is taking those legacy networking technologies into cloud infrastructure has met with very limited success. The legacy technologies just don't support the cloud like they have supported your data centers in years past. They're not as robust in Amazon, in Azure, et cetera. And the other piece is the limitations of the integration technology. So as our customers are re-architecting or refactoring their applications, they're adding in new features that are changing those integration requirements. For instance, they historically have relied on on-premise software agents to handle this data exchange on a batch basis or read-only basis or with limited write functionality. And now they need the real-time connectivity. Now they need the write-back capability. And when you have 2,000 software agents installed, that can become a much larger challenge than the cloud migration in the first place. We released today our case study on our customer Aperture. You might have seen that on LinkedIn or on our website, on our blog. It's on all of those. When we were engaged by Aperture, they had a massive cloud modernization. They were trying to close data centers down and move their digital banking application to Amazon. But they also had more than 400 FIs that were connected using legacy networking technology that had to be replaced. And for them, both those challenges together were a hill that they chose not to climb into by themselves. They chose to leverage Trustgrid to take care of that cloud connectivity. So definitely some bumps along the way here. The way that Trustgrid looks at this problem, though, is from a much higher level perspective. And we use the phrase data gravity, which is from the data management space. But this is the tendency for data to resist centralization. It's pulled to where it's created, almost as if some natural phenomenon. With this, you find data like core banking systems that are just difficult to get out of their on-premise data centers. And it's difficult for legitimate and cultural reasons. The perception of security in the cloud, the sunk cost in the existing core systems and data centers, the lack of perceived benefit to moving that data to the cloud, the desire to be able to see and touch it. But it's not just the banking industry that has this problem. In healthcare, right, you cannot get an MRI in the cloud. You've got to go to a big machine that generates a very large image file to help diagnose your knee or shoulder problems. When you fill up your vehicle with gas, right, there's data being generated at the edge with video traffic. If you think IoT devices, all of these things, the data is generated at the edge, not in the centralized environment. And it has to be integrated to centralized applications. So this problem is really more pervasive, I think, than it is given credit for across many different industries. And yet in the FinTech application perspective, there's yet an additional set of challenges here, which is what we refer to as a multi-stakeholder problem, where your application is integrating data not from a data set within your own infrastructure. So perhaps Fortune 500 enterprise software provider with an internal use case controls all aspects. It's their cloud environment, it's their on-premise data center, it's their single security policy, their single compliance requirements. But for our customers in the software space and in serving their community FI customers, the integration between organizations is a substantial challenge to overcome. There's technical challenges like overlapping subnets that have to be dealt with, but there's always two votes to every question. The security requirements, the compliance requirements, the architecture, the configuration, the integration requirements for the software or appliance on premise. This is a much more difficult problem to solve than if you were deploying a connection into your own data center and so on. But this has to be reflected in your core integration strategy as well. Overcoming these problems is going to take some work. So what do we see from our customers when they come to us with whatever their existing integration strategy is? Long lead times is one of the very first complaints we get. This is true if you have to deploy an MPLS circuit to an FI data center, though we rarely see that option chosen anymore. The market definitely is moving away from MPLS type integration. But it's also true in dealing with some of the API providers. We've heard horror stories of 6 months or 9 months to get a connection to a major core provider's API. So just the amount of time it takes to get started. The complexity of these custom configurations, same thing, whether that is many different APIs that are being integrated to and having to be managed from a number of different third parties, or next-gen firewall configurations or MPLS circuits or some other VPN or agent-based configurations. These problems, they exist at scale almost universally, and it's a lot of work to keep this up to date over a long period of time. Obviously, in this industry, security and compliance are paramount. Building a solution that ensures the security of the solution. Right, I'm sure many of us have heard the stories of a not to be named core banking provider with billions of revenue who had a ransomware infection, and the ransomware was able to traverse their integration network and infect individual FIs not too long ago. Obviously, the same concern going the other direction, an FI security breach that can affect a financial application provider is a big concern. And the complexity of the configuration plays right into this, right? You've got a lot of humans involved in a lot of these solutions, and humans make mistakes that can compromise security. FFIEC, OCC compliance, don't know if I need to go too deep into this. I'm sure we're all quite aware of that. But the SOC compliance, all of the audits and so on that go into this. We deal with a lot of FIs that have a lot of specific complaints about the integration solutions their vendors, whether it's digital banking, mobile banking, account opening, are choosing, because it's forcing them to do more work at audit time. It's forcing them to justify open ports or certain configurations of software or appliances during their audits. Management and support. This is an interesting one. It's especially in the FinTech industry, but really for all application providers that have these connections to manage, the operational footprint looks very different. It changes the complexity of the company. You can walk into 100 SaaS providers in San Francisco, and not one has a NOC because they just don't have this problem. They're not integrating on-premise data. But when you walk into SaaS providers in the digital banking space or in the fraud detection, AML space, they have to run a NOC to manage this integration infrastructure in addition to running the infrastructure that's hosting their applications. It's really a difficult problem that it gets very expensive. Get a lot of bodies thrown at that problem in network operations centers, but also network engineering and DevOps. And so the challenges of this problem really get in the way of efficient operation. We've covered changing technology some already, not just with cloud, but before that, digital banking, The open API side and open banking fits in here as more APIs become available. And then finally, the IT capabilities of the customer, right, of the FI are highly variable. Trustgrid has installed solutions in the smallest of rural banks and the largest urban credit unions out there. And in some cases, the IT capability problem is one of not enough IT or outsourced IT that isn't readily available to help with some of this. And the other problem can be equally as severe: robust, mature IT organization with very stringent security and compliance guidelines, a desire to be involved in some perhaps unusual configurations or deployments to meet their specific requirements. So we got to take all of that into consideration as well. And then there's the second order challenges, limits to the roadmap, the scale, and the expense of the connections to consider. Some aspects I think that are worth noting here as well. We are seeing a trend to more real-time connectivity. I think at least half of the market is focused on read-only or batch systems today, usually handled via either an API from a data aggregator or to a software agent on premise. However, a lot of the big data aggregators are now trying to move to a write type functionality that's requiring a more robust integration method for these reasons, right? That data is perishable. Old financial data isn't that helpful. Anytime we're dealing with payments, there's going to be some write transactions going on. A customer that logs in to check an online balance and sees data from last week is not going to be real happy. And customer expectations drive it, right? Everything has to go faster. Everything is moving faster. Everything is getting closer to real time, from your Amazon delivery to your banking data. The other big aspect that we work with our customers on is bidirectional connectivity. Many of our customers that start with an agent-based solution are looking to be able to do more than just one-way transmission of data. They want to be able to push data back down. That can be for fairly fundamental aspects like technical support. I've got an appliance on premise that isn't operating, and instead of having to work with a representative of the FI's IT team, I want to be able to connect down to it and pull log data off it, or see what's wrong, or update the version is a big one. Trying to manage hundreds of different versions of agents deployed is a support nightmare. But obviously also the other ones we talked about, the ability to write back to that core banking system from the cloud or from your centralized data centers. So the better way, so Trustgrid really grew up in this space, right? We worked from a very early stage with providers like Q2 eBanking and Aperture to take our technology and help them address these challenges within their infrastructure. And when they came to us, they really came to us with very similar sets of concerns. They both had end-of-life issues that were ever present. The Cisco technology they were using had to be replaced in the near term. And both had an eye to the cloud and said that they wanted to make sure whatever solution they chose in this next upgrade was going to be the one that, even if they weren't quite ready for cloud yet, they knew that it was coming in some form or fashion, and they wanted to make one large change to this environment and be both cloud ready and address these end-of-life issues. So this is the solution that we designed. We call it a data mesh platform. And it is fundamentally a technology that connects these FinTech applications, digital banking, mobile banking, account opening, et cetera, to the on-premise data sets with incredibly high availability, right? These things just can't go down, with very advanced security. Moving money around is a real deal. Over $1 trillion a year now passed through Trustgrid connections, and the ability to meet all the various compliance obligations that we're also accustomed to. And so this is a connectivity layer that is abstracting the realities of the network, right? We are trying to, much like your cloud provider is, if you're in Amazon or Azure, take all the work of the infrastructure itself, the IPs and the ports and the NATs and the routes, and handle that so that our customers, the software providers, can just focus on being software providers. We really focus on the challenges between organizations, as we talked about, knowing that it's not possible for our customers to dictate terms to the FIs on how they're going to handle their internal systems. We have to meet them in whatever configuration they have within their local network and data centers, their disaster recovery policies, their security architectures. And obviously there's thousands of FIs, and we've seen every possible combination from incredibly well organized, architected, high degrees of professionalism to smaller FIs that just don't have the ability to afford that level of service or really the need to deploy it. And we talked about the highly available, secure and interoperable nature of this. So can you deploy a solution that doesn't require the application to change, but offer feature sets to grow into it to enhance the overall performance of the system? So we focused and accomplished these three things. The basic elements, I think, are pretty clear to everybody on the call today, right? We have applications centralized in data centers or in cloud environments that have to consume the data from the core banking systems. We have these core banking systems that really fit the bill of being data silos, probably better than a lot of other examples, and they're distributed. Nobody's building a FinTech application or a banking application to sell to one FI. Right, maybe internal to Bank of America or Wells Fargo, that's the case. But our customers are connecting to hundreds of these data sources distributed across really the world at this point in time. Europe has very similar challenges, all in North America, Latin America, South America. This problem is global. Trustgrid has just about connected to all those resources where the sun never sets on a Trustgrid connection. We're getting pretty close. And then some sort of standardized means of accessing data. So whether this is a network connection, so it requires very limited change to the application, or it's an API integration that might require a code level change to standardize the exchange of data with the cores. This is the basic concept that we talk about when we talk about building virtual data warehouses. Data lakes and data warehouses, I'll kind of use those terms interchangeably. I think we're familiar with that concept. Data warehouse, I've replicated or synchronized a number of my data sets into one repository so I can write reports off, so I can master data models, so I can machine learn, right? Build models, train models, whatever I'm trying to accomplish. But in this space, it's really impossible to build a data warehouse of the customer's data. Even when hosted in some of the larger core providers, they still maintain individual databases, individual infrastructure per FI. There's a lot of segmentation there due to the security and compliance requirements of the data. And so it's this virtual data warehouse concept that can be used for a lot of different things, but it has to connect in real time to these on-premise or cloud or data center driven data sets without the ability to synchronize them. The data is going to stay where it's at, and we're going to enable connectivity to it. Okay, and we do this with really three main feature sets. There's the software-defined networking feature set, right? The encrypted TLS tunnels that are exposing that data on a layer 3 or layer 4 connection, just like VPN has done for years with all the latest and greatest software and security on top. Application deployment. So this is a piece that we really haven't talked about yet, but has become more and more important to our customers as they've evolved their use of the Trustgrid system. Integration to some of these cores is a challenge just technically. Solutions like Jack Henry Scimitar that have been around forever really never anticipated or were never engineered to support connections originating from a cloud environment or with latency of 200 milliseconds or 300 milliseconds. So its socket level ability provided with SymConnect really can't handle that very well, very elegantly. A number of technical challenges arise there. But Trustgrid can enable our customers to push down into the on-premise environment, into the data center, a container that handles the interface to SymConnect, but is exposing that data via a REST API connection over the Trustgrid network. So far less sensitive to latency, far less sensitive to packet loss, and so on. So a much more robust environment. So the ability to extend the application into some of these environments as well is critical for data mesh. And then finally, APIs, and especially API management, but the ability to have a standard get customer account history, last 30 days API call that executes and returns the same formatted data independent of what type of core it was executing against, that really abstracts away the complexities of the network, the cores, the credentials, the IP addresses for the developers, really streamline the application integration process centrally. So that those three major components make up the data mesh that's in production today. We drill down here a little bit more, one layer deeper, right, and talk more about Trustgrid specifically, how we've implemented this. The first component is our centralized management platform. It's our portal, it's our management API. It handles all of the alerting features, all the routing changes, right, all the configuration is done centrally, the security and patching and updating. The gateway nodes, the software Trustgrid deploys in our customers' data centers or cloud environments that represent the ability for our customers to build these virtual data warehouses. This is Trustgrid software that terminates those TLS tunnels for the networking. It handles the point-to-point connectivity and distribution of that banking data. And then finally, the edge nodes that are on-premise at the FIs, that is with the in the FI's public cloud environments when they've moved there, and it supports those containers that can be deployed on premise. It builds the TLS tunnels. It exposes the APIs locally. It enables the disaster recovery failover, the high availability features that we deliver. And so what do our customers get from a Trustgrid type solution here, and how do they go about this? The simplified connectivity, right? They're getting real-time connectivity to those on-prem cores. They can be deployed quickly and easily without IT skills really involved from either the software provider or from the FI doing the install. It's very easy to get installed and connected. The enhanced security here, they get the functionality they want, but we've automated so much of the security process. A major challenge from our early customers was the patching on the Cisco devices. And when you have hundreds or thousands of those systems deployed, you've got a never-ending patching job. It's like painting the Golden Gate Bridge. Once you get done, you start back at it right away. Trustgrid automates all of that functionality, automates the patching, ensures that ACLs are configured on the connections, makes sure that two-factor authentication is required for access to the portal. All the things that can be done by an advanced security team, but frequently are in process, right? They're deploying it using a number of third-party tools. They're trying to figure out their own way to do it. All of that's baked into this solution. The guarantee of availability. So the days of FinTech application providers connecting to cores via MPLS circuits is waning. There certainly are some that still do that as their preferred connectivity method. There's a lot of pressure from the FIs themselves to avoid that cost. MPLS can be very expensive, but when you start using the customer's internet connection, the question of uptime really comes into play. And how can you leverage lower cost internet connections preferred by many of these FIs and still deliver 99.9 or 99.99% uptime on the connectivity side? Trustgrid does that with high availability deployments, with automated disaster recovery, with multiple WAN uplinks and the ability to spread the connections between multiple internet connections when the FI provides those. And so we can be as reliable as the FI needs to be. And then finally, a platform and location agnostic solution, right? We don't, you can be in any public cloud with Trustgrid. We support all 4 major clouds. You can be in on-premise environments with vSphere. The hardware appliances we deploy are by far the easiest methodology to get our software and our customer software installed at FIs around the country. We're able to do the deployments no matter where the data is. So, to summarize here, the data mesh is just the most effective way to connect the cloud and especially, centralized FinTech applications to these on-premise cores. It delivers all of the advanced capabilities that our customers are looking to get, the real-time connectivity, bidirectional traffic, the ability to write back to the cores, not just read from them. And really what our customers are asking us for more and more is the ability just to make this somebody else's problem. For all the reasons that they are writing applications in the cloud or looking at migrating their data centers to the cloud, they are looking to offload this problem to a third-party provider who can just make it work. The vast majority of the hard work that goes into the building and maintaining of these integration tools is what Amazon calls undifferentiated heavy lifting, right? It's not strategic to the business of the software providers. It doesn't help them make another online banking customer any happier. It's just required functionality, and so they're wanting to engage Trustgrid to get that off the table. We'll talk very briefly here about a couple of these case studies we've mentioned. We've kind of woven this through, and then we'll have some time for some Q&A as well. So with the Q2 engagement with Trustgrid, there are about 1,300 Trustgrid nodes that they've got under contract with us in stages of deployment. Their solution was an application modernization. They weren't looking at the cloud necessarily for core applications for the main digital banking and mobile banking apps, but some of their acquisitions had already originated in the cloud. They really wanted to connect the data centers that they are managing today, replace the Cisco environment, and future-proof the system going forward so that they could not have to change this integration connectivity in the future. A massive success here for us, a really great customer, great team to work with. The case studies are on our website, the video with Lou Sanko. If you're interested, I'd encourage you to go look at what he's got to say. But deployment times are reduced dramatically. Being able to centralize their network operations functions and let Trustgrid take a lot of the load off of the new FI installations so they can focus on things like cloud initiatives. Compared to the Cisco solution that we replaced, much lower upfront cost and operating costs. And then Aperture is one that I'm particularly proud of. This was a great solution, and quite frankly, the Aperture team accomplished something. Aperture used to be Funds Express. They were acquired by First Data and then spun out of First Data, so around 400 FIs. They were closing down data centers, and due to some of the details around the spinoff from First Data, they had to move quickly. And they had to find a way to get those 400 FIs migrated to the digital banking application that really weren't a whole lot of ways to do it without just a real hard cut. And I think not just 20 plus years in the IT industry, many of us knew the extent of the challenge it was for Aperture to get that done. And they pulled it off in a way that I think few other teams could have. Very proud for us to have been a part of that. We handled all of the vendor connectivity for them, so their AWS deployment of Trustgrid, and then all the FIs are running appliances with an Aperture logo on it that we shipped on-premise pre-configured, got the connections built, and are now managing that solution for them. So we're reaching the end here. Thank you, everybody, for attending today. We've got about 12 minutes, 13 minutes reserved at the end here for Q&A. If I can answer anything, please let me know.
Yeah, we got a couple questions that have popped up. The first one is, does Trustgrid provide the adapters to connect to the core banking systems?
Yeah, so in most cases, we're at an adapter. I heard of them called interfaces for each core, and then sometimes for each version of a core, there's some custom amount of work that has to be done to map the data, right? Whether it's SQL queries or whether it's FTP file transfers or check images or whatever it is. And Trustgrid, our customers typically are doing that either internally. They have teams that are building those adapters. They have libraries of interfaces from previous deployments they customize for each one. And we can take those adapters and interfaces and we can manage them. We can deploy them, version control them, securely execute them, expose that adapter or interface via a centralized API to achieve some of that functionality we talked about earlier. But we don't actually do any of the work in building the adapters or interfaces. However, there are third parties we do work with that can provide those for most every core out there. That's quite a bit faster and easier than doing the manual work. And then there's third-party tool sets like, I almost hate to say it, but like Oracle's ODI or some of these visual ETL tools that give you sort of a drag and drop experience to build data integration and then publish it as a binary or a container on the Trustgrid solution.
Okay. We got one more question. Is Trustgrid SOC 2 Type 2 compliant?
Yes. Yeah. Annual audits and penetration testing. As we are typically transparent to the FI. It's always our customer's choice on how transparent, but because we sit in between their application and their customer, vendor management, vendor due diligence processes have to be executed. Sometimes it's on a per FI basis, especially with the larger credit unions, always at the software provider level. But SOC 2 Type 2 and beyond, backup disaster recovery, a full due diligence package is available for anybody who's interested.
Great. That were the only questions that we got. Thank you, everyone. Oh, one more question just popped in. Does Trustgrid need to have a relationship with all of the FIs that we want to service?
Yeah, I presume you mean like a contractual relationship. The answer to that is no. The way the business side works is we contract with the software provider. And then we engage with the FIs on their behalf. So if a new FI is starting up with Q2, once the contract is signed, Q2 has some integration with our tool sets. They send us the information of the technical point of contact. We engage the FI. We answer the questions they have. There's always questions. And then we pre-configure the devices to that FI's requirements and deliver the solution to them and then assist them with deployment. But all the commercial side is done with Q2 directly. Hope that answered that question.
Yeah. All right. If we don't have any more questions, again, I will thank everyone for taking the time to attend the webinar. Obviously, if you have any additional questions or you want a personalized demo, you can go to our website and there is a request a demo button on the site, and feel free to reach out. Again, we are here to help, and thank you once more for attending today. Goodbye.
Thanks, everybody.